You're listening to This Point. At this point, we wake each other up, walk each other home, and practice the art of good living. This is Hossein, episode number 1. Hello, how are you? Welcome to this exclusive episode of my podcast, This Point. I'm glad you're here. I've been making podcasts over the last year, and from now on, I'm going to start making podcasts in English as well as Farsi. So the Farsi podcast is going to be there, but we're going to add additional exclusive content, episodes only in English. So if you've been listening to my Farsi podcast, you're probably familiar with what we're going to offer here. And if you're new here, so glad to have you. In this podcast, we talk about things that matter, important stuff that nobody told us about. We talk about the mind, the brain, thoughts, emotions, and much more. Today's topic is why we're not taking action. If you think about it, the problem for many of us is not that we don't know what to do. We know what we should do. We know what we shouldn't do. But we simply just go ahead and do the things that we know we shouldn't be doing and do not do the things that we know we should. We know we should exercise. We know we should meditate. We know we should be eating healthier. We know we shouldn't be spending that much time on Instagram and TikTok. We know, but we just cannot get ourselves to do the right thing. So today's topic is this: why aren't we taking action? I constantly get asked this question: why am I not able to do what I know is necessary for me to do? And even when I'm talking to clients and talking to people, one of the most frustrating things for them is their seemingly inability to take action. They have all these dreams and ideas and things they want to do, and they try to do them, but they just can't get themselves motivated to do it. And they always want to ask me, why is that? Why is it that I can't eat only when I'm hungry? Why is it that I can't exercise? Why is it that I'm not meditating? The answer is pretty simple. It all comes down to the same point, which I think is great to know. One of the main tools that I teach to my life coaching clients is called the model, or the self-coaching model. It's a model that I first heard about from Brooke Castillo, but it's not her work. It's inspired by Byron Katie, Eckhart Tolle, Abraham, and many masters of our time. The basic premise of the model is pretty simple. It says there are circumstances in the world, and those are the things that we cannot control. Everything that happens outside of us is a circumstance, and it's just a given. There's so many things that we can't control. We can't control other people. We can't control our past because it's already done, it's gone, it's over. We can't control anything that happens outside in the world, and those are all of our circumstances. And really, those are the only things that we can't control in our lives. The rest of the components of the model, including our thoughts, feelings, and actions, are within our control. We often forget that. We think that everything is either in our control or nothing is in our control. And it never is that way. It's always that circumstances are not within our control and everything else is. So again, circumstances are other people. Other people are not within your control. I'm sorry, but it's true. They are not. And the world out there is not within your control. The past is not under our control, even though we try to change it. It's just simply not something that we have control over. But everything else is under our control. Everything in our present experience is within our control. What we decide to pay attention to, how we feel, how we see the situation, and what we think about, that is under our control. Now, we forget this. Most of us aren't aware of the fact that we can control what we think about. Most of us just think whatever thought happens to be in our minds. But we do have control over what you decide to think about. And what you think about matters. It matters so much. It matters because your thoughts create your feelings. And every single thing you do is because you want to feel a certain way. That's just really good to know. And if your feelings are caused by your thoughts and everything you do in your life is in order for you to feel better, wouldn't it be important to know what you're thinking? It absolutely would. We think we want things. We don't want things. We want the feeling that having those things will give us. It's all about the feelings. And the way you feel is based on how you think. So it again comes back to the thought. And the problem is that nobody told us about this. They didn't teach us. They didn't pull us aside and say, hey, listen, here's the deal. Everything you want in your life is because of a feeling. The feeling you think you will have in getting it, or the feeling you think you will avoid in not getting it. So if feelings are the most important things, don't you think they should teach us that all of our feelings are caused by our thoughts, and maybe we should learn how to think on purpose so we can create the feelings that we want? That would have been amazing. I really wish someone had told us this before. All the misery in high school, it would have been so much easier if we knew this simple fact. Our thoughts create our feelings. Our feelings create our actions. And our actions create the results that we end up getting in life. That last piece is pretty simple. It's pretty self-explanatory. What you do, your actions, or lack thereof, create what you get, create your results in your life. Correct? Okay, so when you ask me the question, why am I not taking action? The answer is pretty simple. It's because of the way you feel. Or why are you taking an action that you don't want to be taking? It's because of the feeling. It's because of how you feel. Your feelings are fuel for your actions. They drive them. And then, of course, your action are always going to create the results in your life, whether or not you like them. So let me summarize this again. Your thoughts, those sentences in your mind that you're thinking about, are creating your feelings. Your feelings are what drive your actions, and your actions create your results. Now, at this point, it's very logical to ask this question: what determines what we think? If my thinking is driving everything, if it's so important, if it's creating my feelings, if it's creating my actions and my results, then I need to know what I'm thinking. And I also need to know how to change that thinking if I want a different result in my life. Well, most of us have never been taught to witness our thinking, to compassionately observe our mind think. And it's a practice that takes practice. So what is needed in order to do that is for you to be separated from your mind and your thoughts. And most of us don't make that distinction, don't make that separation. We don't even recognize that there is a separation. We think we are our mind, we are our thoughts. The first step is to realize that you are not your thoughts. You're not your mind. Your mind is something that you watch. Your mind is something that you're aware of. Just like the way the table in front of you is something that you see, your thoughts in your mind are something that you notice, you're aware of. So we have to get into observer mode sometimes. We have to separate ourselves from the process of thinking in order to watch ourselves think. And this is what a lot of meditation is based on, to sit and watch your brain. And to be that space of recognizing my own thinking. And once you start doing that, once you start noticing what your mind is thinking, you might be a little surprised. And you might also say to yourself, oh, well, that makes perfect sense. When I've learned that my thoughts create my feelings, actions, and results, and then I look at my mind, I can see exactly why I'm getting the results I'm getting in my life. My mind is creating them. That's where it's all starting. Here's a fun little fact. We have 60 to 120,000 thoughts per day, of which 95% are repetitive. meaning you had them yesterday, and 80% of them are negative. It's due to an evolutionary reason why we have so many negative thoughts. It's called negativity bias, but that's for a different conversation. Right now, all you need to know is that your thoughts are creating your reality. And if you're not watching and choosing your thoughts, they are mostly repetitive and negative. No wonder we repeat our dysfunctional habit patterns. No wonder we get the same results over and over again. An unattended mind is like a 4-year-old that's unsupervised in a house, all by himself. He may have sharp objects and may be running around with them, and once you turn the light on in your mind, you may be tempted to turn it right back off. And I've had this happen with a lot of clients. They start looking at their minds and they start recognizing how much pain they are in and how much negativity they are creating. And they just don't want to deal with it. And that's totally fine. But if you decide not to pay attention to your mind just because you don't want to deal with it, it denies you of your power to change. Creating any sustainable change in your life without understanding this model is so difficult. It's almost impossible. And let me tell you why. Most of us try to make change from the action piece of our lives. So if you think about this, remember what I just taught you. Your thoughts create your feelings, which drive your action. If you want to change your action, you have to change the feeling and the thought that has created it. Now, if you try and change an action without changing the thought or the feeling that's driving the action, you're going to have a really hard time because you're going against the current. You're swimming against the river. You're going to work against that feeling and the thought that's creating the feeling. So that's why for so many of us, change is so hard. Because we try to change how much we eat or how much we exercise, or we try to stop procrastinating without changing the thought and the feeling that's driving that very thing that we are doing. And when you can instead really get a hold of why you're not doing something or why you're doing something, then it will reveal to you the thought and feeling combination that's driving it. When you change the thought and feeling, the changing of action becomes so much easier. It becomes almost organically by itself. That's why a lot of people will, for example, quit smoking the moment they realize it might kill them. They've been smoking for 35 years and they couldn't stop smoking, but they go to a doctor and they get a diagnosis. And the doctor tells them, hey, listen, if you smoke one more cigarette, you won't see the end of this year. They immediately quit. Cold turkey. They won't smoke ever again. What has changed? The way they were thinking about smoking. The fact that, oh, it doesn't matter. Oh, it won't kill me. Yet that will change. And that change will create a change in your feeling. And the change in your feeling changes your behavior automatically. And honestly, that's really what coaching is all about. It's about finding the cause of our habits, the cause of our patterns. That's what I help my clients with in our life coaching sessions. We do the work to find out the underlying reasons of our actions, not just to change the action by willpower or force alone. That won't work. It hasn't for anybody. You're not an exception. How many times have you tried to change a behavior without changing the way you think or without changing the way you feel? It won't work. It's so hard and it's not sustainable. A much easier way is available to you if you're willing to pay attention to your thoughts. So when you start to understand this, you can think about something in your life. Let's say you would like to exercise. I've had clients who really wanted to exercise, to feel better about themselves or get in shape or whatever reason. In their heart of heart, they really wanted to start working out, but they couldn't. For example, let's talk about Lisa. She wanted to start taking that action. She wanted to start working out, but she just couldn't get herself to do it. She would write all about it. She would set reminders. She would plan on it. Nothing worked. As soon as it came time to do it, she wouldn't do it. So I remembered to think about the model and how our thoughts drive our feelings, which drive all of our actions, reactions or inactions. So in this case, it was inaction. She wasn't exercising. So I asked her, I said, what do you feel when you don't exercise? And she said, right before I decide that I'm not going to exercise, I just feel apathetic. I feel no drive at all. And I said, okay, what are you thinking that's causing that feeling of apathetic? I knew that apathetic feeling was creating this inaction, this lack of exercise, so I needed to find out what was the thought creating apathetic. And what we found out was that she was thinking it wouldn't matter anyway. She had exercised before, she hadn't seen any results. She didn't see it as something enjoyable. She didn't want to go through it again. She was telling herself that she had to do it to get results. And yet her thought was, it's not going to matter anyway, which created the feeling of apathy, which of course drove inaction. It drove her not to exercise. Now, typically when a client discovers something like this, they want to immediately change it. But what I told her is this: listen, let's just understand this with some compassion. So many of us spend so much time beating ourselves up, trying to change and fix ourselves. And it's one thing I don't allow my clients to do. I tell them, hey, listen, we're not going to beat ourselves up. It doesn't help. It doesn't work. What we are going to do, though, is to understand with curiosity and fascination why we do what we do. Because I believe that everyone has a really good reason for why they do what they do or why they don't do what they don't do. And if we don't take the time to really have some compassion and be curious with ourselves, we won't reveal our truth to ourselves. So when she discovered this pattern, when she recognized that she was creating her own apathy, she was the one creating that emotion that was driving her inaction, she started to get mad at herself. And she goes, oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm doing this. And I said, no. Let's have a look at this. If somebody told you that they didn't think something mattered, wouldn't you want to listen to them? Wouldn't you want to understand why they were saying that? So let's have the same level of compassion for ourselves. And that's really what I think the most important piece of the coaching is. It's really revealing ourselves to ourselves and developing that relationship where we can trust ourselves. So she decided just to notice it. She decided to pay attention to it. And I asked her not to change it. I said, I think for you to fully understand it, you need to be patient with yourself and fully understand the pattern. Before trying to change anything, really clearly watch your thoughts. See what's going on up there in your mind. It's always talking. It's always saying things. Let's watch them and see what these thoughts are, what these sentences are. And as she was able to watch this pattern in herself and see it compassionately, she understood. When she understood that, of course, this is what you're thinking. You're exasperated with all the things you have tried to do. You've been making yourself for years to go through crazy exercise regimes that were punishing and painful. And now, of course, you don't want to do it. Of course, you're apathetic towards it. That's the beginning of change, by the way. That's where you can start to transform. Not from the action piece, from the root, the mind, the thoughts. From there, she could really decide whether she wanted to change the way she was thinking or not. But you can't really change your thinking until you understand it, until you watch it. So in next episodes, we are going to talk a lot about how to change your thinking and how to think deliberately and how to create emotions that you want to have. But I purposely don't want to get into it right now at this episode, because one of the things that I want you to understand really is to know you must understand yourself before you can change it. Stop fixing yourself. Stop changing yourself. Most of us are trying to change ourselves without even understanding it, and that does not work. You must be in a place of compassion and understanding and love, and from there, and only there, you can ignite yourself to change. You cannot struggle yourself into change. You cannot beat yourself up into change. It will not be permanent. It will not last. Whether you're trying to lose weight or meditate or exercise or create something in your life, you can't do it forcefully. And you can't do it with willpower alone, because that puts you against yourself. You're trying to defeat your own mind with your own mind. And the mind loves to repeat itself. It likes to look for patterns and it likes to be efficient. So once the brain and the mind had been thinking the same thoughts over and over and over and over again, because it's been unsupervised and it has, you haven't even been aware that you are thinking these thoughts. To change it requires practice and skill. As I said, it's a practice that takes practice. It's a skill. And just like every other skill, you need to learn it. You need to practice it. So stop changing yourself without understanding it. You're going to be in a battle with your own mind. And of course, when it's you against you, you're bound to lose. So I really want to emphasize that once you understand that your thoughts create your feelings, which create your actions, that's when you can take a breath, understand the pattern, and not beat yourself up. Even if you think it's because of your past, without changing your past, you can't change your behavior right now. You can change the way you think and feel about the past. We'll talk about all this stuff in future episodes. But for now, I want you to understand that with these techniques and practices that we will talk about in future episodes, you can learn to think differently. You can learn to use your mind to your own benefit. Because if we are being honest right now, we are not using our minds to our own benefit. We are using it against ourselves. Or even worse, as Eckhart Tolle said, we're not even using our mind. Our minds are using us. So trust me. Trust me. You don't need to go back into your past. You don't need to sit on a therapist's couch and talk about what happened when you were 4 years old. All you have to be aware of is the thought that you're thinking right now. You don't have to understand exactly why you're thinking this thought. You just have to recognize that you are and be kind to yourself and compassionately, with patient practice, to start a new way of thinking. One more thing before we go. Not all thoughts that are created in your mind will impact your feelings. The only ones that influence your feelings are the ones you decide to think about. For most of us, this is a brand new idea, that we can not think about a thought that we are having. Many of us think because we have a thought, we have to think it, meaning we have to give it our attention, but that's simply not true. You have to learn how not to think about your thoughts, and that's something that we will learn slowly by practicing and meditating one breath at a time. So let me just summarize, because I gave you a lot in this episode, and I know that some of you haven't been exposed to these ideas. This might be mind-blowing. For others of you, this might seem very basic, but I want to take you through this process one more time and really make sure that you understand that every action in your life is because of a feeling, and every feeling in your life is because of a thought that you're thinking. Step 1 is to really begin to look inside your mind and see what you're thinking. To become conscious of your thoughts, to ask yourself, why am I thinking this? When it comes to anything in your life, if you ask yourself why you're doing something that you're doing, why you're feeling the way you're feeling, the answer that you give yourself will always be a thought. And that is the best way to get to know what's going on inside your mind. Because what's going on inside your mind is what will determine how you will feel, act, and the results you'll get. So practice this. Practice paying attention to the content of your mind. It's simple, but not easy, and you'll get it over time. That's enough for this episode. I hope you enjoyed it. It's been my pleasure to be here with you and to begin this process of teaching you what I teach at my life coaching sessions. Thank you for being here at this point with me. I'll talk to you here again in the next episode. Until then, goodbye.